My name's Tanner. I'm 28, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person to write one of these posts. I've read enough of them, sure. Those long, twisting sagas of family betrayal and jaw-dropping entitlement. But I always assumed I'd keep my own life private. Quiet. Tucked away. But something happened that I can't unsee, can't unhear, and honestly, I think if I don't get this out of my system, I might lose my mind. This all started at my grandfather's funeral. It was just a couple of months ago, but it feels like a lifetime. He was 87 when he passed, sharp as ever until the end, though his body had started to give out. We were close. Like, truly close. When I was a kid, he was the only adult I felt safe with. My mom was too wrapped up in her own emotional storms, and my dad, well, that man left when I was 5 and never looked back. But my grandpa, Harold, he showed up. Always. Baseball games, school plays, even just random Tuesday dinners where we'd sit in the garage and eat sandwiches while he told me stories about his time in the army or how he built his first house with nothing but a hammer, some friends, and a whole lot of stubbornness. So yeah, we were tight. I was the one who took care of him in his final year. The doctors called it congestive heart failure, and the last 6 months were a slow, painful decline. I moved into his house, not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to. He didn't want to die in a hospital surrounded by machines. He wanted to go on his own terms, in his own recliner, with the dog curled up next to him and music from the 50s playing in the background. And that's exactly how it happened. I held his hand the night he passed. I sat with him through his last breath, reading out loud from an old letter he had me dig out from a hidden envelope in his safe. That's a whole other part of the story, and I'll get there. But let's just say it changed everything. For now, what matters is this. I was there, and I was alone, not a single other family member around. So when the funeral came and the rest of them decided to show up in full force like some kind of reunion tour, it felt fake. I watched from the back pew as my cousin Blake strutted up to the front of the church in his designer suit, clearing his throat like he was about to accept an award instead of give a eulogy for a man he hadn't visited once in 5 years. Blake is one of those people who talks more about doing good than actually doing anything. He's polished and charming in a way that makes you second-guess your instincts, until you realize everything he says is rehearsed, scripted, like he's always imagining a camera is watching him. Growing up, he was the golden boy, star athlete, straight A's, student government. But behind closed doors, he was a smug, manipulative jerk who only ever looked out for himself. And somehow, he always landed on his feet, usually because someone else broke his fall. Watching him stand there, acting like he and Grandpa were close, quoting Bible verses with that signature Blake smile. I swear my fists clenched without me even realizing. He said things like, he was the moral compass of our family, and his values shaped who we are today, and I nearly laughed out loud. What values? You never even asked what medications he needed, let alone showed up for a visit. Where were you when he couldn't walk to the bathroom on his own? When he fell down the stairs, and I had to carry him back up while he sobbed in frustration? But I kept quiet. I stayed in the back like I always did at family events. Out of the way, invisible. It's funny how that role sticks, even when you've done more than anyone else. Even when you've earned the right to speak. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception hall. White tablecloths, bland finger sandwiches, the hum of polite conversation. I was standing near the coffee table, trying to gather myself, when Uncle Ray, Blake's dad and my mom's older brother, came up beside me. I didn't expect a hug or anything, but I also didn't expect what he said next. You know, he muttered, barely turning to face me. I always wondered why Dad kept you around so much. Guess I figured it out in the end. He sipped his coffee, then added, you were always more of a burden to him than a blessing. I didn't react right away. My mind just kind of stalled. I think my jaw might have twitched, but I didn't say anything. I looked at him, trying to understand what the game was. Why he'd say something like that now. But he didn't give me time to ask. Still, he said with a smirk that made my stomach turn, I'm glad you were there at the end. Save the rest of us from dealing with it. I swallowed hard. I nodded, maybe even mumbled something like, sure, or yeah. I don't remember. What I do remember is the heat in my chest, the sudden pressure behind my eyes, the image of Grandpa, fragile and trembling, whispering my name just 2 nights earlier, telling me to read what he'd written, to make sure they all knew what kind of man he really was. And I hadn't told anyone yet. Not a soul. Not even my mom. because I wanted to wait for the right moment. And now I knew it was coming. So I just stood there, staring down at my coffee, while my uncle walked off to shake hands and share fake tears with people who had no idea what kind of man he really was. Meanwhile, I was clutching Grandpa's final letter inside the inner pocket of my jacket, folded carefully, the ink still fresh, the message still echoing in my head. He'd written it for them, for the family, but he'd entrusted it to me. And maybe it wasn't just a letter. Maybe it was a time bomb. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to light the fuse. I didn't say a word about the letter that day. I probably should have. Part of me wanted to rip it out of my pocket and read it aloud right there in the reception hall. In front of everyone. Blake was charming and Ray was back-patting. But the other part, the wiser, more wounded part, knew they'd just twist it. Call me dramatic. Say I forged it. Accuse me of trying to make the day about me, which, ironically, they were all doing in their own way. So I waited. I listened. I watched. And I remembered everything. The rest of the funeral weekend was a blur. My mom stayed mostly quiet, which wasn't unusual for her. She's not confrontational, at least not with her brothers. When I told her what Uncle Ray said to me, she frowned and said, "He's just grieving. Don't take it personally." That was her default response to everything. Don't take it personally. It could be a slap, a cruel jab, or a years-long absence. Still, somehow, never personal. I went back to Grandpa's house that night. My house now, technically. He left it to me in his will. It wasn't some fancy estate. It was a modest 2-bedroom ranch with outdated wallpaper and a yard I'd been mowing since I was 12, but it was filled with memories. Real ones. Not the kind Blake liked to invent in speeches. Every corner of that house had echoes of my childhood. The squeaky step on the back porch, the dent in the wall from where I tripped running with a football, the kitchen drawer with an old army medal hidden under the silverware. And of course, the safe. It was built into the floor beneath the living room rug, under the coffee table. Grandpa had shown it to me years ago, when I was still in college, saying only, "One day, you'll need to open this. You'll know when." It felt like some dramatic movie moment at the time, and I remember laughing it off. But the night before he died, he asked me to get it. He made me promise I wouldn't let anyone else see what was inside until I felt ready. And now that safe felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my memory. Inside was the letter, written in Grandpa's slanted handwriting on thick paper, sealed in an envelope marked simply, "To my family." And just behind it, in a separate envelope with my name on it, was a second letter. Shorter, more personal. That one I'd already read half a dozen times. It said things like, "I know what you've sacrificed," and "I'm proud of you even if no one else says it." I didn't cry much when he died, but reading those words, "You were my greatest comfort in the end," that's when the tears came. But even then, I held on to the other letter. I told myself I needed time to process, to grieve. But truthfully, I was scared. Scared of what it would do to the family. Scared of what it would do to me. Turns out, I didn't need to worry about disrupting the family. They were already setting it on fire without me. The first sign came a week later. Blake showed up at Grandpa's house unannounced, pulling into the driveway in his sleek black SUV, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. I was on the front porch with a cup of coffee and an open notebook, trying to journal the haze of emotions that had been building inside me. He walked up the steps like he owned the place. "Hey, Tanner," he said with that infuriatingly casual tone. "Got a minute?" I didn't answer, just raised an eyebrow. He took that as an invitation and sat down on the porch swing like it was his. "So," he began, "my dad said you're staying here now." I took a sip of my coffee. "It's in the will, right?" "Yeah, I heard," Blake said, nodding. Kind of surprising, honestly. I mean, no offense, but I always figured Grandpa would leave the house to Mom or Uncle Ray. I stared at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "Well, you know they're his kids. Bloodline and all that. And I'm what, the mailman's son?" I said dryly. Blake chuckled like we were sharing a joke. "Nah, I just mean, it's a big responsibility, that's all. Property upkeep, taxes, repairs. You sure you're ready for that?" I could feel the heat rising in my chest again. I managed his medications, handled hospice, paid his bills, and cleaned up after he threw up every night for a month. "I think I can manage the property." He held up his hands. Okay, chill. Just figured we could talk about, maybe making it a shared space. For the family. Sentimental value and all. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a friendly visit. This was a soft pitch. A manipulation. He wanted the house. I'm not selling it, I said, standing up. Blake blinked. I didn't say anything about selling. You didn't have to. He smiled, that same rehearsed smirk. Well, just think about it. We're family, right? He left after that, but the air felt heavier. I locked the door that night, even though I'd never needed to before. And the next morning, things escalated. I woke up to a call from my mom. Her voice was tight, like she'd been crying. Did you hear what they're saying? She asked. Who? Ray. Blake. The others. They're saying you manipulated Grandpa. That you isolated him. That you convinced him to change the will. I sat down hard on the couch. What? They're talking about contesting it, she whispered, saying the house should be split. He asked me to move in. I snapped. He wrote the will a year ago. It was all through a lawyer, Mom. I didn't even know until after he died. I know, she said quickly. I know, Tanner. But they're angry. And they're spreading it. And boy, were they. Over the next 2 weeks, the narrative morphed from awkward tension to full-blown character assassination. Suddenly, I was the selfish grandson who took advantage of a dying man. They claimed I'd kept them from visiting, even though not one of them had tried in years. They said I poisoned Grandpa against the rest of the family. Blake, in particular, was leading the charge, posting cryptic things on social media like, it's always the quiet ones who smile while they steal. Then came the betrayal that broke me. It was a Sunday. I went out to grab groceries and came back to find the front door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I knew I'd locked it. Inside, nothing looked broken or stolen, but it felt off, like something had been disturbed. And then I found it. The safe. The coffee table was pushed aside, the rug folded. The safe was still closed, but the latch was scratched, as if someone had tried to pry it open. I dropped the bags and knelt beside it, heart racing. The envelope was still there. Both of them. But someone had been there. I called my mom immediately. Did you tell anyone about the safe? She hesitated. I might have mentioned it to your uncle. He asked about Grandpa's documents, said there might be property papers, or... I hung up. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just hung up. Because I finally understood. This wasn't just about grief, or money, or even jealousy. This was a campaign. They wanted to erase me. Erase everything I'd done for that man. They wanted to rewrite the story of who Harold had loved and who he'd trusted in the end. And worst of all, they were willing to lie, to break in, to accuse, to twist the truth, to get what they wanted. I sat there on the floor, the envelope still warm in my hand, and I knew something had shifted, that the line had been crossed, that whatever hesitation or fear had held me back before was gone now. This wasn't just about protecting Grandpa's legacy anymore. This was about defending my own. I opened the envelope. I read the letter again, and I started planning. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I sat in the living room with the lights off, the letter in my lap, listening for any sound outside. The crunch of gravel in the driveway, the creak of a window, the scrape of a lockpick. I kept checking the door, triple-locked it, pulled the curtain corners tight. Not because I thought Blake or Ray would come back that same night, but because they already had. They crossed the line. And when people show you what they're willing to do once, you start imagining what else they might do next. The next morning, I did something I probably should have done weeks earlier. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Nadine. She came recommended by one of Grandpa's old friends, Walt, the guy who ran the bait shop in town. Smart as a whip, Walt said. Takes no nonsense. Got her degree late in life, and now she scares the hell out of people twice her size. That was exactly what I needed. I showed Nadine the will, the letter, everything. I explained the situation from start to finish. Blake's false eulogy, Ray's comment, the social media smear campaign, the rumors, the attempted break-in, all of it. She nodded through the whole thing, scribbling notes with a fountain pen on a yellow legal pad. Then she looked up and said flatly, "You're not crazy. You're under attack." That felt like the first moment I could breathe. She filed an official report about the break-in, advised me to install cameras, which I did that same afternoon, and got a certified copy of the will from Grandpa's attorney. Then she asked the big question, "Do you want to go on the offensive, or wait to see what they do next?" I told her the truth. I wanted to fight, but I didn't want to be like them. And right now, I just didn't have the energy. Because the truth was, I was slipping. I didn't notice it at first. Grief has a weird way of disguising itself. Sometimes it looks like fatigue, or irritability, or just silence. But soon, I stopped returning texts. Stopped showering some days. Stopped eating real meals. I let dishes pile up. Let the yard go wild. Let the voicemail inbox fill to capacity. I was in that house, day after day, surrounded by memories, but not the warm kind. Not anymore. Now every corner whispered, "You're alone." One afternoon, I found myself staring at a framed photo of Grandpa and me on my high school graduation day. He had his arm around my shoulders, and we were both smiling like idiots. I remembered that day so clearly. He'd been more excited than I was. Took me to a diner after, bought me a slice of blueberry pie, told me he couldn't wait to see what I'd do next. And here I was, wasting away in his house, letting people lie about him. About me. That's when I hit bottom. But the thing about rock bottom is, it's solid. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something inside me click back into place. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove to the hardware store. I bought paint, a power washer, a weed trimmer, and 3 bags of mulch. When I got back, I dug in, literally. I cleaned the gutters, scrubbed the siding, pulled out the rotting shrubs, and planted fresh ones. I fixed the leaky kitchen faucet, rehung the crooked photos, and swept out the garage until it looked like a showroom. It was exhausting. It was healing. Each nail I hammered felt like taking a piece of my life back. Each stroke of paint on the porch rail felt like reclaiming a memory. I wasn't just fixing the house. I was reminding myself that I belonged here. That this place, this life, this story was mine too. But it wasn't just the house I needed to rebuild. It was me. So I called a friend I hadn't talked to in months, Sean, my old college roommate. We used to talk weekly, but I'd let it fade. He answered on the second ring. "Dude," he said, "you're alive?" "Barely," I replied. And I told him everything. He listened. He cursed under his breath a few times. Then he said, "You need to get out of that town, man. Even if just for a day." He was right. The house had become both sanctuary and prison. So I packed an overnight bag and drove 3 hours to his place. We drank bad beer, played video games until 2 a.m., and he made me laugh so hard I forgot how heavy I'd been feeling. That weekend reset something in me. When I got back, I signed up for therapy. I found a local grief counselor named Lynn, who looked like a librarian but talked like a Navy SEAL. Our first session, I barely spoke. The second, I cried halfway through. By the third, I was finally saying things out loud I hadn't even admitted to myself. Like how I felt invisible in my own family. How I hated that my love for Grandpa had been turned into a weapon. How I sometimes wondered if they were right, if I had done something wrong. Lynn didn't offer cheap comfort. She just nodded and said, "You were chosen for a reason. You were there. They weren't. Don't let the guilt of others rot your truth." That stuck with me. Meanwhile, Nadine called to let me know the family had officially filed to contest the will. "They're claiming undue influence," she said. "That you manipulated him while he was sick." Blake submitted a written statement. "Says your presence in the home was coercive." I laughed. I actually laughed. My presence in the home was feeding him, changing his sheets, and massaging his legs when they cramped. "I know," Nadine said. "And soon, the court will too." That was the moment I realized something else. They weren't just challenging the will to get the house. They were trying to erase me. To make it look like I was nothing more than a leech who slipped in during Grandpa's weakest moments and took advantage of him. They couldn't stand that I had something they didn't. His trust, his love, his last words. So I stopped hiding. I posted a photo of Grandpa and me on social media. No caption, just the image. Within an hour, Blake commented, "Interesting timing." I ignored it. Then I posted a second photo, this time of the porch I'd just repainted, with Grandpa's favorite rocking chair positioned perfectly beside a potted plant. "Getting the house back in shape," I wrote. "Feels good." This time, Ray commented, "Too bad it wasn't yours to begin with." But I didn't delete the comments. I didn't block them. I let people see the pettiness, the bitterness, and something shifted. Friends I hadn't heard from in years started messaging me privately. "I remember how close you were with your grandpa," one wrote. "Don't let them twist that." Another sent me a screenshot of one of Blake's posts, a long, vague rant about false family and people pretending to care at the end. The top comment? "Weren't you the one who skipped every holiday for 5 years?" Blake deleted it an hour later. I was starting to rise, slowly, quietly, not with vengeance or fury, but with truth, with proof, and with patience. I knew the court hearing would come soon. I knew Nadine would be ready. But there was one more thing I hadn't decided yet. Whether I would read Grandpa's letter out loud or not. Because as much as I wanted to clear my name, I knew what that letter held. I knew the things Grandpa had written about his children, about their failures, about how he'd watched them drift into selfishness. It wasn't cruel, but it was honest, devastatingly honest. It could burn every bridge in the family. And while part of me wanted that, wanted to watch their smug smiles shatter, another part still believed in something softer, gentler. Grandpa had trusted me with his final words. But maybe the real test was whether I'd use them to hurt or to heal. That question haunted me, right up until the night Blake made one final, unforgivable mistake. And that changed everything. It started with a phone call from Nadine. The tone of her voice told me something was off before she even said the words. They subpoenaed the medical records, she said. The other side, Blake's team, they're trying to prove your grandfather wasn't mentally sound when the will was changed. I blinked. He didn't change the will while he was sick. Exactly, she replied. That's what I'm about to prove. I could hear the rustle of pages as she flipped through her file. He updated his will 14 months before he passed. That's 6 months before the heart failure diagnosis. His doctor at the time even wrote in the file, and I quote, "Client is mentally sharp, articulate, and aware of all decisions being made. We'll have an affidavit by tomorrow." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "They're grasping," I said. "They're desperate," she corrected. "And they're about to get sloppy." I didn't know it yet, but Nadine was right. They weren't just getting sloppy, they were unraveling. And all I had to do was keep watching, waiting, and documenting every move. It was almost like they couldn't help themselves. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure started getting to Blake and Uncle Ray. Blake tried to play it cool on social media, but his posts grew more erratic, like someone trying too hard to maintain an image while the walls caved in. One minute, he was posting photos of brunch in the city with captions like, "Family first," and the next, he was vague posting about liars who don't deserve what they stole. Then came the email. It arrived in my inbox on a Wednesday morning. No subject line, just a single sentence. "You think you're so clever, but I'm the one who knows what's in that letter." No name, no sender, but I knew who it was. Blake had never been subtle. The grammar, the cadence, it screamed of his smug little smirk. Except this time, it wasn't just annoying. It was revealing. Because he shouldn't have known the letter existed. I hadn't shown it to anyone. I hadn't mentioned it to my mom again after the break-in. I hadn't even told Nadine about the full contents. So how did he know? That was when I remembered something that had been nagging at me since the day of the funeral. A detail I'd pushed aside while grieving. The jacket, the one I'd worn to the service. It was navy blue, vintage, and a bit too snug in the shoulders. I'd left it draped over the pew during the eulogy because it was too warm inside the church. Afterward, I found it tossed over the coat rack in the foyer, like someone had moved it. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But now I was thinking about it a lot, and I started piecing it together. The jacket had the letter in the inner pocket. The jacket was unattended for over an hour, and Blake had spent half the service standing near the foyer, schmoozing the priest and glad-handing relatives. He saw it, maybe even read it. Or maybe Ray did. Either way, someone had gotten their hands on Grandpa's final words, long enough to know it could destroy them. That explained everything. The break-in, the sudden accusations, the legal action. They were trying to bury the letter because they already knew what it said. That changed things. I called Nadine. I told her about the email, about the jacket, about everything. She paused for a long time, then said, "You want to use the letter, don't you?" I didn't answer right away. My hand hovered over the paper like it was some kind of detonator. "It's your decision, Tanner," she said. "But if they're going to claim you manipulated him, we might need to remind the court who really knew Grandpa." I hung up and sat in silence. I kept rereading the letter. His final words to the family he raised, criticized, and ultimately chose to keep at arm's length. It was raw. It was honest. And it was powerful. That night, I pulled out a pen and notepad and began crafting my own plan. Not for court, for something bigger. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to make sure everyone saw the truth. The next day, I started with subtle moves. I reached out to my cousin Marissa. We weren't close growing up. She was Blake's younger sister, always sort of caught in his shadow. But we'd exchanged a few sympathetic texts since the funeral. She hadn't taken sides publicly, and that made her valuable. We met for coffee at a place downtown. She showed up in jeans and a hoodie, looking uncomfortable. She stirred her drink without taking a sip. "I just want to be left out of it," she said before I could even ask anything. "I get that," I replied. "But you're not out of it, Marissa." "Not really." She looked up, frowning. I leaned forward. "Blake broke into the house." Her eyes widened. "No." "Yes," I said. "He, or your dad, tried to open Grandpa's safe. And now he's emailing threats. He knows what's in the letter." She didn't deny it. Her silence was enough. "I'm not asking you to testify," I continued. "But I am asking if Blake said anything to you. Anything about the will, the house, me." She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Scrolled, then handed it to me. It was a text from Blake. "He's not keeping it. I don't care what some letter says. He doesn't deserve it. Grandpa was losing it anyway." I took a screenshot and sent it to myself. "That's all I needed," I said. "You won't be involved. I promise." Next, I visited Walt, the bait shop owner, Grandpa's oldest friend. I asked him if he'd be willing to write a statement for court about Grandpa's state of mind before the will. He didn't even hesitate. "I'll do you one better," he said, pulling out an old camcorder from behind the counter. "Your grandpa and I recorded a fishing trip about a year before he passed. He talks about everything. The house, the will, you." My mouth went dry. "You still have the footage?" Walt nodded. "Wasn't sure if it'd ever matter. Guess now it does." By the end of that week, I had a growing pile of ammo. Blake's email, his text to Marissa, the footage from Walt, the medical affidavits, the notarized will, and of course, the letter. All I needed was the moment. And that's when the invitation came. A family memorial dinner, organized by Aunt Lorna, Ray's wife and the self-proclaimed matriarch of the family. She posted about it online like it was some community event. "Join us in celebrating Harold's life, sharing stories, and uniting in his memory." The irony made me laugh. Blake was listed as the guest speaker. There was my moment. I RSVP'd without hesitation. I showed up on time, dressed clean, quiet, respectful. Just like always. The outsider in the corner. The boy who took care of Grandpa while everyone else sent thoughts and prayers from afar. The dinner was held at a rented event hall. White linens, flower centerpieces, cheap buffet food. Everyone was there, cousins, aunts, uncles, even people I didn't recognize. Blake stood near the podium, practicing his speech with a few cronies nodding around him. Ray was holding court in the corner, drink in hand, laughing too loudly. Marissa caught my eye and gave me a small, nervous nod. I made my way to the back, carrying a box. Inside, printed copies of the letter. 30 of them, folded neatly, sealed with red wax. And one copy in a leather folder, for Blake. I waited. I let him finish his speech, all smiles and nostalgia and carefully edited history. Then I walked to the front. The room fell quiet. I placed the leather folder on the podium. Blake looked confused. Then I turned to the crowd and said simply, "Grandpa left a letter. For all of us. I think it's time you read it." Gasps. Murmurs. Shuffling. I walked through the crowd, handing out copies. One by one. Page by page. Nadine was right. It was my decision. And this was how I chose to use it. Not to attack. To expose. And just as Blake opened the folder, read the first few lines, and paled, I turned, walked to the exit, and stepped outside into the cool night air. I didn't need to see what happened next. Because the truth was finally in the room. And the fuse I'd been holding? It had just been lit. I sat in my car across the parking lot. Engine off, windows cracked just enough to let in the crisp night air. The glow of the event hall pulsed behind me like a heartbeat, a soft murmur of voices rising and falling, until it didn't. Until someone finally read the letter out loud. I knew the moment it happened. The volume inside dropped to nothing, a silence heavy enough to suffocate. Then it broke. Someone gasped. Someone else shouted. Chairs scraped the floor. Glass clinked against plates. And then I heard Blake's voice, sharp and defensive, trying to wrangle back control. Too late. I had written nothing in that letter. I hadn't needed to. Grandpa had done it all himself. The letter wasn't vindictive. It wasn't cruel. But it was honest in the way only a man who knew he was dying could be. It opened with warmth, thanking everyone who had ever played a part in his life. But by the second paragraph, it shifted. He addressed each of his children and grandchildren by name, praised them for their virtues, gently, clearly, laid out their failings. Then came Blake. Blake, you are gifted, charismatic, intelligent, But you have used those gifts for vanity, not for love. You stood in front of me only when there was a camera in the room. I was not fooled. You have not earned the things you covet, and you will not find them in my will." That sentence alone was enough to rip the mask off him forever. But Grandpa wasn't done. If you are reading this, it means Tanner kept his promise. He stayed with me through the end. He saw the mess, the pain, the fear, and he never once left my side. He is not just my grandson. He is my legacy. The house is his. And if anyone chooses to contest that, they do not deserve to call themselves my family. I didn't need to be in the room to see how that landed. I didn't need to see Blake's mouth go dry or Ray's face drain of color. I didn't need to witness the eyes turning toward them, judging, processing, remembering all the false stories they'd spread. Because now, the truth had a voice. And it was Grandpa's. The next morning, I woke up to 38 missed calls. Blake tried twice. Ray tried 9 times. Aunt Lorna, surprisingly, called 12. Marissa only once, but she left a voicemail. "Hey, I just wanted to say thank you. I think you did the right thing. I know it wasn't easy." I saved that message. Not because I needed the validation, but because it reminded me I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined the manipulation, the gaslighting, the calculated cruelty. They thought I'd sit back and let them control the story. But I'd rewritten the ending. Nadine called later that afternoon. She sounded chipper. "Well, that was dramatic," she said. "I didn't actually stay," I admitted. "Just handed it out and left." "You missed a show?" Ray stood up, yelled something about "this isn't legal," and stormed out. Blake tried to laugh it off, said it was clearly fake, until 3 different people pulled out their phones and showed identical copies. Apparently, Walt's footage made the rounds too. He shared it online. "Marissa did," she said. "Posted it on Facebook. Captioned, 'Harold knew exactly what he was doing.' It's already got a few hundred shares." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. Let them try to bury the truth now. They'd be digging through concrete. Over the next 2 weeks, the fallout unfolded like dominoes. Blake's lawyer dropped him. Ray quietly withdrew the contest petition. Their smear campaign fell apart because every accusation they'd made now looked exactly like what it was, a preemptive defense. A cover-up. Word spread in our small town, fast and wide. People who'd once whispered about me started offering condolences, then congratulations. "Good for you," they'd say. "Your grandpa would be proud." Even the priest who'd overseen the funeral sent me a handwritten letter. "I regret allowing that young man to speak during the eulogy. I see now that it was performance, not remembrance." The last nail in the coffin came when Nadine scheduled a final mediation meeting. One last attempt for Blake and Ray to settle before the court date. They didn't show. Instead, their lawyers came in with signed statements withdrawing all claims. No apology. No admission of guilt. Just silence. I didn't care. The silence was louder than anything they could have said. Because now, the will stood as is. The house was mine. The story was mine. And their masks were gone. Peeled away not by rage or vengeance, but by their own words, their own hypocrisy, and the voice of a dying man who refused to let the wrong people write his legacy. But revenge, true revenge, isn't about legal victories. It's about what happens after. It's about the quiet meals I now enjoy in Grandpa's kitchen, alone but at peace. It's about the garden I revived out back, planting roses where the weeds had taken over, just like he always meant to do. It's about the day I received a handwritten letter from Marissa, slipped into the mailbox. "You were the only one who loved him without wanting anything back." I see that now. I'm sorry it took me this long. It's about the morning I woke up and realized, for the first time in months, I wasn't angry anymore. And it's about the last time I saw Blake. It was unplanned. I was at the farmer's market, picking up honey and peaches. He was across the aisle, alone, pretending to scroll through his phone. He saw me, of course. We locked eyes. He didn't say anything, didn't nod, didn't smirk. He just looked hollow. And I walked right past him like he was a stranger. Because that's what he was now. Not family, not a threat. Just a man who bet on lies and lost everything. And me? I went home. I brewed a pot of Grandpa's favorite coffee. I sat on the porch, rocking gently in his chair, watching the sun fall over the front yard he loved so much. I pulled out his letter again, creased and worn now from so many reads, and smiled. Then I folded it back up, placed it in the wooden box where I now keep all the things that remind me of who I really am. And I closed the lid. That chapter is over now, and I don't need their permission to move forward. They tried to erase me, but I'm still here. And this time, I'm the one holding the pen.